Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 434. I was white here, kicked off with e4. My opponent played c6, the Caro-Kann defense. So I played d4 and he goes knight a6, a very unusual move. By far the main move in the Caro-Kann, and the main idea is just to play d5 there, get a stake in the center, and you have lines open for the light squared bishop, and the dark squared bishop will be developed at a later point. Often played like a French defense with the light squared bishop outside the pawn chain. Anyway, knight a6, so an unusual idea, although it has been played before apparently. And I go with f4, which is not, I guess, the best idea. It looks like these knight moves, either knight move or c4 is the way to play it here. One drawback of f4 is that this pawn is a little bit weak, and you'll see that either knight f6 or d5 are the top engine choices here, and they would put immediate pressure on my e-pawn. So that's probably the reason why f4 is not such a great idea. But my opponent just played d6 here, and I get quite a nice position after a few moves. He goes h6, bishop d3, I get all my pieces out. He goes g6, and I castle. So typical, well, let's put his next move on, bishop g7. Typical Blitz play where a player just quickly gets all his pawns on the third rank and gets a few pieces out. And it's not so easy to break down, and black can gain quite a few tempos. Not tempos. He can gain time on the clock by playing these moves quickly. So anyway, that's why you see it a lot in Blitz. But it's not necessarily a great way to play. But he is starting to put pressure on my center, so I decided to just shore it up with c3. He goes knight c7. And now I push on with f5. This is one of those difficult decisions. I don't have such a huge lead in development. I only have two pieces out, although I have castled, and I've got my rook on a good file. He's got two pieces out as well, and he's got very solid pawn structure. So it's not clear that f5 is the way to go. Also, he didn't necessarily have to take. He could have played g5 here as an option, just tried to keep it closed. So I think there's some pros and cons to this move, but at some point you do have to push forward and open things up. If you spend a lot of time trying to organize your pieces and get them all carefully onto the correct squares before playing your pawn break, it just gives your opponent time to organize his forces. So it makes some sense to push on in this situation. So my opponent decided to take here, and it's probably not a bad choice. Top choice of the engine. I take back, and I've got at least a half-open file here to work with, and I have a rook I can put there, although I started worrying about my other pieces. Knight f6 he developed, and I bring my bishop out to f4. I like to get all my pieces out, but he can harass the bishop with knight h5, and now I have to decide where to put it. I didn't really want to trade this bishop off for the knight, so I wanted to move it somewhere it couldn't be attacked. I mean, technically this is a bad bishop because of this pawn structure here on dark squares. But these pawns are not fixed in place. They might move forward at some point, and as long as that's the case, this has a potential for being a good bishop. So I want to keep it. If I play it here, it blocks the e-file. So I decided to drop it back to d2, but this also blocks the natural development route of my knight on b1. So I'm not entirely sure that was the best move, but all this keeps some advantage for me just because my opponent has played very quietly. And of course, I don't want to repeat moves. So I start developing my knight. I realize if I can't bring it out in this direction, I have to bring it out through this kind of route. He goes bishop d7, and I bring my knight back into the game. He goes queen c8 now, piling up on my f-pawn. I go knight e3 to defend it. Knight c to d5. Yeah, and this is starting to look kind of interesting for black. He's finally managed to get his pieces out. He hasn't castled yet, but he hasn't committed. He could castle on either side. And there is a potential of a attack along the g-file against my king. So although the engine is giving me a comfortable margin all through here, I think there's nothing particularly wrong with black's play till this point. Let's see. I decided to take the knight. In retrospect, it may have been better to just retreat my knight, keep all the pieces on, because the one thing I do have going for me is more space, and I still have to figure out how to best use that space. But exchanging knights is not a bad idea. I'm going to follow up with c4 at some point and chase the knight away. First I played queen c2, hitting the pawn. And now I guess he could play c5 if he wanted to get some counterplay. He just chose to play queen c7, and now I get my c4 move in, kicking his knight. Knight drops back to f6, and rook a to d1. I think this is a mistake. I should put a rook on the e file, either one, the a rook or the f rook. The point is the e pawn is undefended. I should just attack it because that stops him from castling. I played the rook to the d file, and thinking that the other rook would go to the e file. But if I was going to play the f rook to the e file, I should have just moved it first because this lets him castle, and with no particular penalty. So I decided to push on with c5 here. Maybe I could have continued with rook to e1 again, either rook to e1. Still, that's a logical move. Yeah, c5 has some pluses and minuses. It leads to a locked up position because he goes d5 after I go c5, although I was thinking I would still have some ideas of advancing the other pawns. And what else after c5? If he exchanged, I thought I would be happy with that. That would at least open up some lines towards his king. And it did. Oh yeah, the other drawback of it is it opens up this square for his knight. So c5, after c5, he could play knight to d5. And that's a pretty good defensive square for the knight. So that's the thing that's wrong with the c5 move. Maybe I should prepare a little bit, or just push on with b4. Leave these pawns in the center. This is another way to play it. Push on with b4, b5, and try and disrupt his pawns that way. Anyway, after c5, he didn't blockade with the knight, though. He blockaded with the pawn. And this actually helps me now because these pawns, although they form a kind of a solid wall against my pawns, they're also keeping his knight out of the game. The knight can't easily hop over here and get involved, and this square is currently under control. So I actually have a pretty strong move here with queen a4, and I play it. It's a double attack. It's attacking the a pawn, and it's also threatening the bishop to a5 move, which skewers the queen and the rook. So this is difficult to defend against, this queen a4 move. Knight to e4 is a recommended move here. He played king to b8, defending the a pawn and just allowing the skewer. What's interesting is there's this b6 move, which the computer starts to like after a while. b6. I'd probably take with the pawn here because I want to open things up. And then he could take back. And then my bishop has to drop back. And it looks like he can perhaps organize some kind of defense, maybe queen to a7 here to chase my queen away. And I really only have a slight edge, so that would be best play. I picked up basically a pawn, a one pawn advantage. Actually, the material's still the same. I haven't picked up a pawn at all. So this is a pretty decent defense. I still have some edge because his king is less secure than mine. Okay, but he played queen f4, perhaps not thinking that was a reasonable idea to open it up, and now I can grab the rook, win the exchange at least. He throws in a check. So my king goes to the corner, and then he takes my bishop back. And here I retreated my queen. It looks like this was an actual mistake. I should probably keep the queen over here, making threats against his king, and just bring more pieces into the attack. I was worried about his queen. It's putting pressure on everything, right? It's hitting all of my pieces here, and there's some possibility of coordination with the knight coming in like this. So I did want to bring my queen back to defend, but looks like it's stronger to just continue pressing forward with a move like knight e5. Now, what's nice about knight e5 is that it controls the g4 square, so knight g4 just gives up the knight. Well, the engine is still recommending that. So the other thing I guess that's going on is that the queen is nearly trapped here. So if black doesn't want to give away a piece with knight g4, say he tries to come in knight e4, also hitting this f2 square, I take it, and he takes back, then I can play rook d to e1, and it looks like his queen is in trouble. Yeah, all these squares are covered. The queen covers that square, the knight covers that square. So the queen has to run away. It looks like h4 is one of the few squares. I kick it again with g3, queen here, and now queen to a5 hitting his rook. And it looks like this is how I win material. He can't, if he moves his rook, he'll lose the knight. And play king c8. If he plays king c8, though, I can take the pawn. So it looks like I'm breaking through in one way or another in this line. So it's kind of a deep line, and not so easy to see. Although now that the computer has pointed out to me, it's nice that knight e4 is kind of a dual-purpose move. It's attacking, and it's also defending this g4 square. And if the knight comes into e4, I can just trade it off. So that's how I should have played. I brought my queen back to defend along the second rank against my opponent's threats, still keeping an advantage. Comes in with e4, and I didn't want to trade off this good bishop just yet. I thought I could harass his queen a bit. His queen ran to f4. Now I have a tempo move against the queen. I'm starting to think look for tactics, but I didn't see them. I decided to trade off the knight. He takes back. And, well, I can grab a pawn here at least and chase his queen away. But once again, this knight e5 move is the stronger move. I don't know why. I never really noticed this move. Let's see the idea here. Knight e5. Let's see. If he takes the knight, then he loses his queen. So the queen has to move. Say queen to h4. Then what's my idea here? f6. Bishop takes, and now rook takes e4. Is this trapping the queen in some way? Queen to g5. It's funny, this is giving us such a strong advantage. Knight takes f7. Oh, there's this fork. That's funny, this fork plays a role in the game too. So it's just the awkward placement of his pieces here I can take advantage of. But, well, in a case like that, it's easy to see why I didn't spot this move, knight e5. That was some tactical calculation to figure that one out. Okay, so I just played rook takes e4, getting a pawn, chasing his queen away. He took on f5, reasonable move. And now I went queen e2, lining up against the e-pawn. He goes bishop e6, blocking. And I went with b3 here. I didn't want to give away a pawn over here. Once again, knight e5. I think eventually I do get my knight to e5. It's funny. So he played bishop to d5 here, hitting my rook. And I went forward with rook takes e7. And I actually get saved in the end by this knight maneuver. But this was a bit of a risky move because my rook is close to being trapped here. He starts with bishop to e6. Of course, I picked up a couple pawns, and I can always say give up the rook for a bishop and still be in the have an advantage. But now I want to bring my knight forward. I had been thinking about this discovered attack against the queen, and now I realize with knight e5 I'm double attacking, even triple attacking the the square f7. So I figured this is a good time to cash in on this discovered attack on the queen. Queen went to g5, and now I played rook takes. I didn't want the rook to sit around and wait till it got trapped. He takes back, and now I take with the knight. And now I realize that not only did I not give up the exchange, but there's this fork. So I've won a couple of pieces, and I get the exchange back, and I'm just in great shape here. So my opponent resigned at this point. So pretty interesting finish. And yeah, it just goes to show there's these hidden tactics on the position. Sometimes it's worthwhile slowing down to try and find them all. But they can be pretty deep. But anyway, that knight e5 to f7 idea came through for me in the end. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.